understand about people who are not as privileged as we are. And I'm speaking from like a working class background with all of the intersections that you heard at the beginning, like a long list. But there are always people who are more oppressed than you, people who have less privilege, and it's our responsibility to work from providing the support for those who are most marginalized first, so that then we can automatically be able to provide the support for those who are more privileged. And a lot of spaces work from the top down rather than the bottom up. And yeah, a lot of people don't understand that asylum seekers have no recourse to public funds. They can't apply for certain services. They receive a very, very small budget to live on, if they receive any. We don't understand that sex workers can't apply for certain benefits, that certain people who are seen as undesirable by the state can't walk into spaces like certain charities and receive the help that they want, because they will instead be judged, or there'll be negative stereotypes or hoops that they have to jump through to be able to get funding, like having a permanent address or being sober. And we shouldn't be working in that way. We really do need to challenge that structure and focus on supporting those who are most marginalized, and allow them the autonomy in the support that they receive and the support they want to receive, because sometimes they actually don't want the things that people think that they want. Not everybody wants a bag of groceries which don't have anything to do with their culture or won't bring them nourishment or make them feel good. And also, it doesn't always have to be emergency or essential things. People deserve nice things. People deserve to be treated, to exist in the world in the same way that we do. We can walk into a shop and we can walk into this bookshop and buy ourselves a book just because we like the look of the cover. We don't have to be told we get this book and nothing else. And so, we need to give people their choices, their autonomy, and their freedom.
Thank you so much, Eshi. I wanted to pick up on the sex worker sort of centering of like most marginalized people. And Susie, like in the midst of all of this cost of living crisis, after lockdowns, Edinburgh's put through a really, really backward policy of like the nil ban of trying to close down all of the strip clubs, and that's supposed to be by next year. I know that United Sex Workers Union has been at the forefront of fighting against that, and you've pushed through this amazing judicial review I think it's on the 1st or 2nd of December, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing to organise around that and how people can support you?
Okay, we had the fundraising that was mainly for our legal costs, and we ended up having to fight Edinburgh Council as well to just be part of the judicial review, as the clubs and the owners of the clubs were allowed to challenge it, but there was nobody challenging it from the actual people who work in the clubs. So that's what the union was doing. We do have, I think we still have the GoFundMe page, and we have been raising plenty of money for that. We've also been just talking about it, I guess, plenty of press release and just talking about it in the changing rooms at the clubs to try and, reassure each other, and hopefully, it all goes in our favour.
And just picking up on that changing room chat, like how are you supporting each other? Because it must be like really draining and really scary as well. The future that's being discussed here.
Yeah, it can be. It's very frustrating as well, because I just feel like it's often the case when discussing sex work that, like in the city chambers or Houses of Parliament or Hollywood, it's often like discussed, but rarely are sex workers actually invited to the table to explain what we need, explain what we want, and how things could change for the better for us. Instead, we're outside protesting. It's a lot of it is trying to sort of keep up morale, especially in the cost of living crisis.
Yeah. Thank you. Flo. Yeah, I guess what's clear from the last few years is that, mutual aid has become the middle class white slogan, and everyone's saying solidarity, not charity, without really understanding what it means. And that's kind of the slogan that Food Not Bombs has been using for many years as well. And Food Not Bombs, as you said, started in an anti-nuclear organizing and open call against billions of dollars spent on world-destroying weapons which hopefully will never be used, while at the same time people in the streets were starving and homeless. How did Glasgow Food Not Bombs, this iteration, obviously third iteration, how did it start? And what made you start organizing and finally kind of spark into a group so that maybe other people here can also begin their own autonomous group?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, full disclosure, I am white and middle class. I'm representing a group of people, a more diverse group of people, so I can't speak about experiences that I don't have. But hopefully I can cover some of the bases at least. But yeah, it's super important for us as a group to be really vigilant about slipping into that kind of depoliticized, defanged model of mutual aid. I did see that popping up quite a lot, especially during 2020. I don't know about, I've obviously read your pieces about it, but yeah, I think the idea of these kind of groups that pop up and perform these charitable acts that are seen as a short-term solution just didn't feel right to me or to the other organizers. I don't think that getting back to normal is the goal with this, because for a lot of people, normal is unbearable. And, having a neighborhood organization is not inherently radical. So, I don't know if any of you are in community Facebook groups. I'm in a couple. Some of them are pretty horrifying. So if you're going to build these community spaces, you do need to have this vigilance and awareness of the pitfalls. I think when we first got started, it was pretty tricky to know where to go. I mean, I'm not an experienced activist. This is my first real venture into organizing. I felt like I didn't have enough knowledge, enough information, enough connections. Who am I to make these choices? But I've learned a lot, and so have my fellow organizers. I think it's really important not to feel kind of immobilized by not wanting to make mistakes, not wanting to get it wrong. You will make mistakes, it happens, but you will learn from it, and you will become more effective and a stronger group, I think, as a result of that. And the second part of your question about what motivates us to continue organizing is a really tricky one, because sometimes it's really hard. Oftentimes we feel like we are just managing to keep it together. Even just showing up with food takes a lot of energy. The burnout is real, and we sometimes do feel a bit like we are kind of just mitigating, like a plaster on a broken leg. So it's important to not let yourself off the hook for that, because you can always be doing more. But to recognize that, even a small act of resistance is still an act of resistance. Something that made a really huge difference for me in my feeling of hope for the future was the Cameo Street Day. I don't know how much people know about that, but essentially a street near where I live, someone spotted an immigration van, pulled up, and alerted the anti-raids. One of our members actually was the person who got under the van and stayed there for about 9 hours. And by the time I got there were hundreds of people all together protecting preventing the van from leaving. And I remember I was feeling kind of ill that day, and I didn't really want to go, but I thought everyone's going to be super hungry. We need to get some food and drinks down there. So I start frantically making sandwiches. And I show up, and all of the residents and the shop owners had already put out food and drinks. It was this totally organic, real mutual aid, where nobody needed to be told what to do. There was nobody calling the shots there. It was just people coming together to protect their neighbors. And that was a really beautiful moment for me and for the other organisers for Food Not Bombs. Yeah, that really felt like a vision of the future that we could have.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of you have spoken about a future which, you know, already exists. It exists in these small-scale grassroots groups. It's existed for centuries, but is like covered by this sort of idea of political idea of like this is impossible. Like people won't look after each other. People are designed to be like in competition with each other. That's human nature, as thrown about a lot. And it seems like actually the problem is that a lot of mutual aid groups don't get the same publicity. They don't get the same community. And people burn out as well, I suppose. What keeps you all from burning out or how do you keep yourself well through all of these? Because it's difficult. It's difficult being around, like working in those in all of our communities. Anyone?
After you. I hate this question because I think we always try to think of a good answer for it when we answer it, and we think, oh yeah, no, we're trying to mitigate burnout, we're doing nice things for ourselves, but quite honestly, the reality is that, you know, there is a lot of work to be done, and somebody has to do it, and quite often that person ends up being you, and so sometimes we can focus too much on like our own personal burnout and forget that we're within a community and that we can rely on our community members, we can lean on them, we can ask for support if we need to, we don't need to just be an individual. But also, on the other hand, to throw a little something in there, sometimes some people don't get an option of like not being in burnout or to take a break, and so sometimes we need to look at what we see as our capacity for doing things and try and challenge our own privileges as well, and to push a little bit further in that sometimes we can take days off or we can go and do nice things for ourselves, and there are still people who need support. And so, yeah, it is definitely a balancing act, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in, I don't want to burn out, that we forget that we are a community and that people need support and we can also need support too. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree because I'm not good at preventing burnout. I'll get to a point where I'm screaming into a pillow. So, yeah, I think it is important to realise that you are part of a community and, you know, sometimes just say, no, I don't have capacity for this right now. Can somebody else take the reins? And more often than not, you find somebody is willing to. So, yeah.
Yeah, again, pretty terrible at preventing burnout. Usually on either a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, I am in an absolute state thinking, how are we going to pull this off? You know, I'm peeling potatoes and I'm thinking, you know, there's no way we're going to be able to manage it. And that's when I get, you know, pretty down about things. But by Sunday afternoon, when we finished sharing a meal with people, like, I feel so, like, hopeful, so like invigorated by it. Like, I genuinely love doing it so much that seems to kind of counteract the burnout. And I don't want to like romanticize it. Like, a lot of the time it is hard work and there's like loads of washing up. But I think if you find something that you find that you're really passionate about, that you feel is worthwhile and that aligns with your values, like, it can give you energy as much as it can take away energy. Which, you know, doesn't work every single time. Like, you still have to, like, sometimes take a break. But, yeah, I'll let you know when I've figured it out.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just before we move to questions and answers from the audience, well, the questions are from the audience, the answers from these great people here. I just wanted to ask if you had one action you'd like people in this room to take away from today's kind of discussion. Would anyone like to start?
Just one?
I mean,
How do I pick? Obviously, I would really appreciate if people checked out UK Mutual Aid on Facebook. but I'm going to throw in another one because, why not? I think it's very important that we all take a look at the groups and the spaces that we're organising in, and have a look at it, have a look at the intersectionality, have a look at who is at the forefront, have a look at who you're supporting and why. And I think that every single group needs to take time out sometimes to just really just assess and look at what they're doing and make sure that they're on the right path, because sometimes we just keep going and going because there's always a need for something, that we forget to actually just take a critical look at ourselves and make sure that we are doing it for the right reasons with the right people and intersectionally. So
Well, USW are part of kind of like two campaigns. I mean, we've still got the JR up and running, but that is, that's kind of coming to an end. I mean, we've got it all organised for December. We're also part of a HAH campaign, Hookers Against Hardship, which is to help with the cost of living and those in the most marginalised groups who are struggling. So, yeah, they're both on like GoFundMe, so if you want to check them out. I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't have like one specific thing, but kind of a broad idea, which is just get active. If you're not already, just get out there, find something. It doesn't have to be Food Not Bombs by any means. Join like your local anti-raise network, a tenants union, great idea, like Living Rent if you're in Scotland. We're starting a little theory reading group, really entry level, because like I struggle with theory. I'm sure a lot of other people do. But yeah, you don't need a huge network of people to do it. It could just be you and a couple people. When we first started Glasgow Food Not Bombs, there would be like maybe 2 or 3 of us giving out soup in the park. And yeah, that's still better than nothing. So yeah, get active if you can.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions from the floor? I think, Myri, are you running around? I will run around. Thank you so much.
Does anyone want to start? Oh, we're shy. That gives me a chance to get the cable ready for you. And also just point out that we have flyers for the Edinburgh Anti-Raids Network on the sort of till area. So if you're interested in their organising, Edinburgh in Nicholson Square had its sort of Kenya Street moment as well. So there's a very active network here. Yes, we have a question.
Can you hear? I'm so loud. I have a question about Food Not Bombs, because we were talking about starting a group in Oxford. And we were just thinking, because there's a lot of us who are like already organising kind of near capacity, like we're not going to be able to properly dedicate time to it.
Sure.
Do you know how like the kind of setup went in Glasgow? How long did it take to kind of get more volunteers? Because we were talking about just doing a sign-up form for volunteers when distributing food, but like, I don't know how many,
Yeah.
How did it go, basically?
I mean, I'd love to tell you that it's super easy and quick. It took us a really long time. We've had a lot of people come and go for various reasons. They've like moved away. They've got like more demanding jobs. They've just run out of capacity. I think the gap between like our first like call out post looking for volunteers and our first food share was maybe a month and a bit, just over a month. But what I would say is if you really have limited capacity, then maybe just do like a monthly food share, It's more important to be reliable and consistent than it is to be really frequent, because you don't want to tell people you're going to be there and then not show up. We're really fortunate that we're able to do it every single week, but there are other Food Not Bombs groups that do, every couple of weeks. I know Plymouth Food Not Bombs and I think Dundee Food Not Bombs do it every 2 weeks. So yeah, don't put too much pressure on the frequency. But yeah, I hope it works out. Let's chat afterwards.
Yeah, another one here.
I I was just wondering if you have any advice for like student organizers, specifically like university students, looking to get more involved with mutual aid, because I feel like as university students, a lot of the time we're kind of removed from the local community. And I mean, this is for a number of reasons, but I feel like oftentimes we just forget that we live here and that we are a part of the community as well. And yeah, because a lot of students come from abroad or come from other parts of, you know, the UK, they don't interact that much with the local community. But yeah, I was just wondering if you have any advice on how to like break that barrier and really be able to get involved.
I think it's important for students to realize that they will never be part of the local community. They are, I'm going to be very nice with my words. They come into a community and they force a gentrification on a community. So I think that the most important thing that students can do is to challenge their universities, to challenge the council, and to challenge the way that universities are allowed to come into local areas and bulldoze local areas, more so than we need students coming into our local areas. We have resources, we have people, we have community. We don't necessarily need people who are coming in temporarily or because they feel bad. We need an education through like students to understand that, you know, when you go into your halls in your first year, by the way, I've never been to university, so forgive me if this is wrong. You go into halls or something in your first year, but then your second year, you're looking for the cheapest accommodation in areas which are pushing families and people out. So instead, there could be some awareness raising, some campaigns, some projects happening within the universities to teach students that it's okay for students to stay within student areas, for students to live in like purpose-built student blocks, rather than coming into working class areas and devastating them. And I think that those kind of campaigns, that kind of like activist work, is more important than students setting up new mutual aid or food or, you know, any projects like that. If you do want to get involved in the local community, ask the people there. And I think that's something that a lot of students don't do. They don't just come into a community and say, hey, where can I volunteer? Because there will be spaces that will be looking for volunteers, that's for sure, but we don't need new groups. We don't need new projects. So try and find the balance between supporting the local community if you're already in there and trying to give back, but definitely try and focus on challenging universities and not just on their impact in gentrifying like working class communities across the country, but also in their imperialism, their fact that they pay money towards arms companies, that they fund Israel, that they fund all of these other awful things, and that really can be what students can do.
Anyone else want to contribute? We've got one question online, and then did anyone else, and then another one at the back. Okay, so the question from online was, how do you navigate respectability politics, say around sex work or incarcerated folk, in getting reach and platforms? Don't know if either of you.
Yeah, we don't try to like, we challenge respectability politics, obviously, and we try and amplify the voices of those who are in the vulnerable, marginalized positions. We work with anti-carceral solidarity and campaign against prison expansion and cradle community, to name a few groups that work with people who are currently and have previously been incarcerated. We're very much listening to the voices of what people inside want to say. They're writing what we speak about. Their voices are the ones that are heard on recordings. They're putting themselves, you know, at risk to be able to say these things as well. And so what we can do as privileged people is to try and challenge anybody who has an issue with that, that hasn't got a strong view on abolition and the politics that we should have as groups of privileged people who are outside of the prison and detention centres. And the same with sex workers. You know, sex workers really do need to be at the front of our movements. Their voices need to be heard. And as an ex-sex worker myself, I've worked with loads of different groups that have wanted to exclude sex workers from those, like, from being vocal because of ideas because of outdated ideas, backwards ideas of sex work. And yeah, we need to challenge that. And if we can't challenge that in those spaces, we need to leave those spaces. We shouldn't enable swerfs. We shouldn't enable people being anti-sex work. We shouldn't enable people being anti-abolition or anti-people who are being targeted by the state.
Susie, did you want to add anything around like Edinburgh and especially like conversations around sex work and sex work solidarity in Edinburgh, and whether or not you feel like there are some spaces that are listening or some spaces that like you just don't get heard?
Yeah, so it does feel that like, especially like politicians mainly, don't tend to listen to sex workers. Like they put forward things like retraining and everything, but nobody's actually spoken to sex workers. Like I have got to say that there's a lot of well-educated women I've worked with who, and then there's also sex workers who have other commitments, other jobs, and people don't like. I feel like when sex workers aren't invited to the table, it's generally people who have never done sex work or never worked with sex workers, and they have this stereotype of what a sex worker is, what strip club's like, and it's always something like out of a Hollywood film where it's run by gangsters and this, that, and the other, and it's just it gets tiring as well to sort of like be like, well, hold on a minute, I'm this person and this is my experience, listen to me. It's quite a difficult thing, and it's really annoying when people speak for us and not with us. They don't realise that essentially oppresses us.
Thank you. My microphone's not going to come to you. Yes, and then you can grab a seat there.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a question for Susie. It was just about the closures of the strip clubs, and I was wondering if you could say a little more about what the premise of that was, and also a little more about what the judicial review involves, like what's going to happen,
Yes, so it was the end of March 2022. The council have decided to implement sexual entertainment venue licences. Now, these have been in place in England and I think Wales for a long time. I think it's early 2000s. Yeah, they've not been in place in Scotland. Scotland's been running on like a liquor licence and just kind of agreeing these are the conditions, but they've wanted to implement them. And this allows the councils to decide how many licences they're going to grant. And so the regulatory committee decided they were either going to the option was keep the 4 that already have a licence and run as strip clubs, or to just decide to implement a nil cap and not allow other venues to apply for well, they say they can apply, but whether they get granted it or not is probably not going to happen. So they decided to implement the nil cap, which means that in April 2023, the clubs would have to shut. So obviously the union took them, wanted to challenge this with a judicial review. The businesses also challenged it. And in September, the council wanted to try and block the union from being part of the judicial review. And we won that. And we also won if if we lost, like, the judicial review, we would be liable for council's lawyers' fees, legal fees. And we actually won, I've forgotten what the term is, but it basically means that we won't be liable if we lost for the council's legal fees. And so that's going ahead in the beginning of December. It was there was also another weird sort of like thing where they brought it to the council, like a council meeting, about reviewing the strip club nil caps, but that's not going ahead till February, which is after the judicial review, so it just really doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, that's basically it. We're just, yeah. Also, sorry. I was just going to say, also we're challenging it, or our lawyers are challenging it on the basis that it would be discrimination against women who work in the strip clubs, because the majority of dancers do identify as women, and you know, even the bar staff will be out of work, but it's not like they're able to kind of go into, they'll get redundancy, and they're also able to go and get another bar job maybe, whereas we would have to like leave the city or travel to different cities in order to, you know, carry on dancing at sexual entertainment venues. So, yeah.
I was just going to ask, like, how much of this has come from pressure from these, like, so-called, like, radical feminists who are just, like, super anti-sex work, or, like, religious groups that are really anti-sex work? Do they have a lot of pressure on the government?
Yeah, I think that's another issue. There's been quite a few. Like, there was... so the dancers, a fair few of the dancers spoke about the clubs and, you know, what would happen to them should they shut at the regulatory committee meeting. But then there was also a lot of like views from radical feminists who want to get rid of strip clubs, who say it's violence against women, and yeah, there's been a lot of pressure, I think, from these groups, but it's rather annoying because they don't really work with the people in the industry. They don't speak to the people in the industry about what they want and need. So, yeah.
I think we are out of time, but there will be an opportunity, sort of, if you find our speakers, if you had a burning question you didn't get a chance to ask. And then also, sadly, Miss Major wasn't able to record her address for us tonight. So if anyone was expecting the wonderful Miss Major, we will be recording that, and we'll send everyone who had a ticket the recording. So you will still catch her talking sort of more historically about mutual aid around Stonewall and in queer radical spaces in the US since then. So stay tuned for that. And I know we're all out of the habit in COVID times, but we should put our hands together and applaud and say a very big thank you for all of you for being here tonight. And now be free.
I think we leave.